Hello, welcome to our celebratory podcast for World Rivers Day on Sunday 28th of September. My name's Catherine Russell, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the blue dots in Ireland, and then my colleague Steph O'Toole will join us to talk about Coomhola and StreamScapes a little bit more. StreamScapes is an environmental education charity and NGO near Bantry on the banks of the Coomhola. So we're living, playing and working in the local river and catchment area. And that just allows us to sort of facilitate the exploration of this environment, encouraging communities' care, protection through hands-on learning, citizen science project and conservation. The communities are so important. We believe that connection to a place promotes care for the environment. So we're aiming to inspire that ownership and active participation in your waters. Like I said, my name's Catherine Russell, so I'm the Blue Dot Outreach Coordinator here at StreamScapes. And my role is to work with community groups to raise awareness of their Blue Dot rivers. And the Blue Dot rivers are the waters with a high environmental status, so they're really important. It's pristine water. And we know that these waters are maintaining the excellent water quality due to the presence of all the certain invertebrates, fish, and the pearl mussel. And these sensitive species can't survive in polluted waters. So they're excellent bioindicators for the overall ecological health of the river. So the Blue Dot waters are rivers that run in their natural form, their physical form. They haven't been changed by any human activity, as in straightened or the banks stabilised. And the blue dots are often found at the headwaters. So their pristine water quality has a great effect downriver. But throughout Ireland, there's this healthy network of blue dots. I think the tally is 384. But if we look at the map, there's a huge concentration to the west of the country and mountainous areas. And those blue dots can be anything from rivers to lakes to transitional waters, which means like the estuary areas, and all the way down to coastal areas. Now, unfortunately, there's definitely been an overall decline in river health in Ireland, and we've seen a decline in the high status river sites since the 80s. It's still recorded by the EPA, and that's why the protection of high status water has been prioritised as part of the River Basin Management Plan. So there's lots of reasons why we're losing these blue dots, and it's between forestry, agriculture, industry, the hydromorphology, and even domestic water runoff. So Steph is going to introduce us now to the wonders of our lovely Coomhola in the catchment area there. So Steph, over to you.
Hello. So when I think, I've lived here a long time, and when I think about the Coomhola River, it's not just the water flowing through. It's like the people, the climate, the rock, everything. That's what makes the river. So often the names that we give define the place. And so Coomhola, it's Coomhola, means the valley of the floods, or the valley of the flash floods. And that links very well with the fact that the Coomhola River is a spate river. Now, a spate river is generally about less than 20 kilometers long, and it's usually running from mountain to sea, and it floods. It can flash flood because if you get a lot of rain falling, the water level rises very quickly, and again falls very quickly. And so the name is descriptive, so that the name of the river defines the name of the valley. And one of the main tributaries of the Coomhola River is the Coolleen, which flows down from the valley, what we call the Priestleaves Valley. The bottom of the valley floor is called Coombe, but the Coolleen translates as the stream that flows over the bare rocks, which if you ever walk along that valley, you see, how true it is. So one of the factors, when we talk about, from source to sea, so it's bit hard to say exactly what the source of the Coomhola River, but it's the Loch Jar Bracdarg, which means the lake of the red trout. That's that's kind of right up in the leap, and the red trout are also Arctic char. Now they're a relic from the Stone Age. They're kind of like it's a sort of like an isolated population. They're not in many places in Ireland, but it's just partly the geography. I suppose a valley forms a river, but the river also forms a valley because to have a river, it means to split, to flow through, and then you have the tributaries going in. So it's gathering kind of the water is gathering in. So as well, then the landscape is changing from the higher headlands, and it's going through the rock, and then it's going down onto a sort of a more mountainy valley floor, and then you're going down through the small farms, and then it's a bit better, got trees along, and then it's running to the estuary. So one of the things that are forming the river, or that the river is running through, is it's the geology. It's the mountains in West Cork. They're old red sandstone, and so you get them a lot in the southwest. And one of the things is when you running along with the high rainfall and the spate rivers, you've got boulders and rocks and gravity kind of coming down. So one of the things that will define the Spate River, and especially the Coomhola River, you've got big rocks and boulders, and then gradually over the years, the Spate River, the Spate flood will move those quite huge rocks, and then gradually over the years, you're getting like smaller rocks, then you're getting pebbles, you're getting kind of rough sand. So as well as being a spate river, it's also an eroding river. Now, eroding rivers, it's a steeper fall, and they're not, when you've got a depositing river, you've got mud and stuff like that. But the Coomhola River, you've got gravels, you've got rock, and that really defines the shape of it. And it's very interesting to watch, when you're getting down, you get the boulders get rubbed away, and then you get sort of gravel banks forming. And again, that's, that gravel and, coarse sand, that's perfect then for these sort of invertebrates and, the salmon to lay their eggs. The other thing that's affecting the rivers here in the southwest, and particularly the Coomhola River, is the climate. We get about rain on about 250 days a year, and the annual rainfall is about 2.5 meters. And the other factor is that the rainfall, when it comes, we have an oceanic climate, so it's oceanic and temperate, so we get kind of warmish southwesterly, a lot of rain coming in. We get more than twice the rain on the east coast, and when that rain comes in, it's very, very slightly acidic. And unlike, say, where you have streams on chalk, the Coomhola River, it's it's flowing through bog. So the sandstone is slightly acidic. You're not getting mineral from that. And then when the headwaters are flowing through the bog, it's very, not really acidifying, but very slightly acidic. And this is one of the reasons why, sort of too much forestry, monoculture, say of Sitka spruce, can also affect the acidity. So it's one of the reasons why it's very important to have the silt traps. I mean, in 2007, there was a lot of forestry was cut down. Those traps weren't kind of maintained, they weren't effective. And the silt went into the river, and it had a very damaging impact. It's surprising that something that seems like it's nothing much can really make such a difference. So it is, eroding, and the other thing it is, the scientific word, and I hope I can pronounce this right, is oligotrophic, which means there's very little food. So if you look at what every living creature needs, it's shelter, clean water, oxygen, and food. So it's great for the oxygen and the clean water, but food is not so, there's not so much. But and it will mean that salmon and trout and even the invertebrates, can take longer in an eroding river because there's not the huge amount, though the other factors are perfect, it's not the huge amount of food. So it's it's just another factor that makes it. Now, Coomhola River was always known as a salmon and trout river. And, salmon are what are called catadromus, which means they live their adult life at sea and they return back to the pools that they spawn in to lay their eggs and for the cycle to start again. And sea trout also come up. Now, there's a really, one of the things that's really helped the river here is the Coomhola Salmon and Trout Anglers Association. They've really done a lot in terms of stocking and preserving and even in terms of cooperating with Streamscapes, and it's been of great benefit to the river. So as Kat mentioned earlier, there's the water quality. One of the ways you can um, assess the water quality are by the invertebrates that live there. And it is one of the things that made Coomhola like a blue dot river. It's the stoneflies and flattened mayfly nymphs are only found in the cleanest of water. And that's true. There might not be massive numbers of them, but they are there. And the other thing that's really special about the Coomhola River are the freshwater pearl mussels. Um, they can be found, and what's very sad is they've disappeared from so many rivers, but they are there. They'll take a lot longer to grow. That like a lot of the rivers in the west that have them, they'll have bigger numbers, but a lot of them are going through limestone, so there's a lot more to form the shells. But the fact that they're there, and they have a symbiotic relationship with the salmon and trout. They when they spawn, this tiny, tiny glaucidia kind of swim off and they go onto the gills of the trout and salmon, and they'll stay on them for a few months and then they'll drop off, and then eventually they'll drop down into the gravel and start growing. And I mean, what's amazing about them is that they can live to up to 140 years. And the fact that they're here is really special. And the other thing, oh yeah, they're filter feeders, which means that they'll clean the water. So there's a symbiotic relationship between the fish, the pearl mussels, and the water, because everything. What's really important, I think, for clean river or any habitat is that everything lives in balance, because everything has adapted to its space. So if something knocks that out, it will affect everything. Now, when you're moving down from the bogs, um, there are a number of special species in the bogland. One is the Arctic willow, and there are very, very few places that you will actually find them in Ireland. And they're quite amazing because they're tiny, they're really little, but very special. It's almost like you know, yeah, they've sort of survived through the Ice Age. And then the other thing is that there are what are called the Lusitanian plants as well. But there's what's quite beautiful are the butterworts, which are the carnivorous plants that you get up in the bog. And then you've got the peat forming sedges and um and the rushes that are kind of surviving on it. Um, and there are also kind of going up a lot of the heathland, the sort of bog and heathland, you get heath spotted orchids. And I remember when we moved here first, I was sort of walking through this boggy bit and I thought, I'm walking on orchids. I mean, it was just, you just think of them being sort of rare and precious. And further down on the stream, like between Snov and the estuary, you get the early purple flowering orchids. And there are a few others, which is, very special, that you can just sort of be kind of, driving along and there, the orchids on the bank of the river. And there's one species of dog rose that's just found down by the estuary, and it's called the glaucous rose. And I don't think it's found. Yeah, I don't think it's found anywhere else in Cork, and I don't think it's recorded very much anywhere else. But it's just amazing that they've actually survived. So just in terms of the fish, okay, we've got the Arctic char, salmon, trout, eels, minnows, and sticklebacks. not very many sticklebacks because they'll be kind of lower down where it's formed, but just quite interesting seeing, you've got that thing from the height, you've got the Arctic char, and then you're going down further, and you've got the salmon moving up. And so you've got the brown trout, and then you've also got the sea trout that will come up. And birds that are specific to the river, you've got the kingfishers. And it's great to have a river where it's a common sight to see a kingfisher. I mean, they kind of have to have a kind of a bank that they can burrow into for their nests, but they're definitely there along the river. And one of my favorite birds, then, it's sort of like a dark brown and white bird, like with a bib, is a dipper. And that's incredible because it's dependent on the case caddis that you'll also find in fairly clean water, but it will go and walk along the bank of the river and get the case caddis and kind of smash them open, and and then bring them up. And they will also nest quite early in the year because their food is available. Herons are commonly seen right from fairly high up in the valley to lower down. You've got mute swans nesting on the estuary. There's an old kind of um, it's a Celtic thing. I often talk about that you'll have on the mouth of a river, you'll have a pair of swans nesting, and they're considered to be like the guardians of the river. And then there's a little egret, which I find is really interesting because it only came into Ireland in the 90s, and then it started nesting, and it's fairly widespread, and it's nesting down at Snob. And one bird that's actually very pretty on the river, the grey wagtails, you'll see them bobbing kind of along on the rocks. In terms of the mammals, the ones that are directly connected are otters, and they're common enough along the river. Mink, unfortunately, and there are a number of species of bats around, but one of my favorites is Daubenton's bat, and it flies along the river, sort of eating the insects. In terms of industry and agriculture, so you've got the smaller hill farms. There are sheep, and there's some cattle, but there's been a really good history of cooperation between the people who are farming and the river. So I think that really helps. And the fact that there are still trees along a lot of the river actually helps hold the water together. And there's a big awareness in the community of how important the river is. So just in terms of how people earned, there was okay, there's farming, and then there's the fishing. And but one of the interesting things is that the river in history was actually an industrial site. There was in the 1500s, in England, the oak forest got completely depleted because of smelting, using the oak to smelt ore for iron. And so, and at that same time, there was also the pilchard industry, and there used to be, like, in Bantry, fish palaces. I mean, huge numbers of people were employed, and the fish were sort of brought over to Cornwall and stuff, and distributed through Europe. And then in turn, when they were looking at industry, when the pilchards were being brought over, and then they looked, because there was still plenty of oak forest here, they started bringing boats, ships that would have delivered the pilchards, then ended up bringing the rough or for smelting, and they would actually come up right up Snow Bridge into Coomhola. And so the valley then became like an industrial site for, oh, I don't know, about 150 years, completely finished off the oak woods, and also changed the structure of the river because they needed to have dams. There were two townlands here, and one's called Mill Little and the other is Mill Big, and they were involved in the smelting, and not the smelting, the smelting. And then what was also needed then in dry periods, they made a dam up in Coombe, at the flat part of the Priestley Valley, so that would get released down, so that you'd have the process for cooling. And so for a long time, that completely changed the landscape and deforested it. But it's things are growing back and things are improving. So it's just an interesting seeing how the community forms the river, but also the river forms us.
It's really interesting connections, isn't it, Steph? And like your knowledge of the history and the social history of the area and the river like is amazing. So it really gives a picture of like how that river forms, and even that the Coomhola being a blue dot has been through its period of sort of industry and agriculture, but has sort of morphed into a more sustainable form.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see how things change. And often when I work with, children, just when they think of what has always been here, they think there's always been cattle and there's always been sheep. But in fact, Celts brought in the cattle, and sheep were brought in later. So, what a different landscape it would be. And it's still continually changing. I mean, even now, I've been here over 40 years, but there are a lot more trees. And partly that's to do, I think, with people's awareness, and because I think when people have had to fight for their land, I mean, it used to be that older sense that it was people or trees. So one of the first things people used to do when they get land was they cut down with trees because that was associated with landlords. But that's all changed.
It's almost come a full circle now, isn't it? We're trying to get land to plant it up and keep the trees now.
Well, I think people realize, everything is important. So you really to try and to do things in a balanced way makes for a balanced system, a balanced habitat.
That's it. And actually, it's nice to see that the rivers can come back. So it's been through that period of kind of the river dying off and being used for industry, but actually now you've got all of the really important sort of indicator species, and the salmon are in the river. There's the pearl mussels. I can't believe their lifespan is so long that they actually manage to survive like a tiny mussel.
It is amazing. I mean, I always find it amazing because I bring some empty shells that are found in the rivers around here in Kerry, and hold this shell up and go, this is over 100 years old.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Like I said, your depth of knowledge is amazing, and it's so interesting to listen to you about the whole ecology and environment of the river. So it's been great to chat to you, Steph. Thank you so much for all your knowledge. And if anybody would like some more information on what we've talked about, the Coomhola Valley or Blue Dots, please get in touch with us at info@streamscapes.ie or the website streamscapes.ie. So thank you very much.